from Z.P.H School, Ilavaram. I'm glad to interact with you. I would like to ask a question. Can I ask, ma'am? Here, my question is: Could you please explain about different kinds of job opportunities in the space sector?
I'm so delighted that you asked this question, because this is absolutely one of the things that I love to talk about. And I'll go through these really rather quickly, but thank you for asking this question. So I want you to think about it's entirely a universe of possibilities. Just the other day on LinkedIn, and I'm talking 3 or 4 days ago, they are looking for a maintenance worker for a future commercial space station. They are looking literally for a guy that can fix or a girl who could fix everything. Maybe they're an electrical engineer, but I want you to know this: the world is in desperate need of your genius. And I want you to ask yourselves right now, what can I create? And then I want you to start pursuing that. Even now, I know that you guys are, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. You are at the prime of your brain. Go ahead and see what you can create and become the youngest entrepreneur ever. Now, we've talked about maybe you want to become an astronomer, right? And to the young person who asked about is there beginning to our universe? This is the picture of the galaxies that the James Webb Space Telescope looked at, that to astronomers, these things shouldn't be there. They shouldn't exist. We don't expect the universe to organize itself so quickly, and yet here they are. So that's upending our cosmological models. And is the universe older than we think it is? Have we gotten it all wrong? And do we need to rethink things? We often think that the only careers in space are astronauts, but think about this: anybody who goes to space at this point will be called an astronaut. And you don't have to answer this for me right now, but I want you to think of 3 careers that aren't really normally associated with space. Some things I've heard are like zookeeper, lawyer, car dealer. Let's see. Sometimes I'll also get they'll start naming things, and I'll go, oh, let's rethink that. Let's rethink that, because space plumber. On the Inspiration 4, the SpaceX mission that was the orbital flight, they were in orbit around Earth about 5 days. Their toilet didn't work for the 4 of the 5 days they were in space. The toilet didn't work for 4 of those days. So it would have been fantastic for somebody to be a plumber. Right now in the U.S., a plumber working for NASA or these commercial space companies can easily make $85,000 a year. A welder who's putting the rivets and making sure all of the parts of the rocket and other spacecraft are all together can make these are U.S. dollars, 125,000 U.S. for being a welder. And a lot of times we think these careers are less than, but there are all these industries talking about trades in space. That goes for electrician, that goes for plumber, that goes for builder, that goes for architect, that goes for a welder. And so these are no longer considered not awesome jobs, but very much crucial jobs that are going to be needed. This was actually a guy on the International Space Station that was needing to fix the plumbing. He was actually basically radioing down to mission control. But social media, and some of you, I guess, probably love watching YouTube or have your favorite YouTubers. They're going to be people who are going to be needed to be able to communicate these stories from the moon and Mars. There'll be geologists, robotics, graphic artists, chefs, and spacesuit designers. And the reason that I love that you're asking this question is because you guys are the generation that are going to be the benefactors of this $2 trillion business. JP Morgan, basically a financial institution, already is thinking about what kind of currency will you be using on the moon or Mars? Will it be crypto? Will it be Bitcoin? Will it be Mars bucks? I don't know. Again, we have spacesuits. Maybe you're designing the better headgear, the better communication systems, the better life support systems. These were the ladies who were part of sewing together the Apollo spacesuits. They were 19 layers thick. Now this is currently, I don't know if you've seen this, if you don't mind me playing this video, this is the Axiom spacesuit that I was telling you a little bit about.
The company adapted more than half of NASA's design.
Yes.
Axiom engineer Russell Kelly slipped into the suit to show us how flexible it can be. You do that pretty easily.
Oh yeah, it's not too bad.
It's a top-to-bottom redesign. The helmet's greater visibility, and these boots were made for moonwalking. This 21st century spacesuit is made with 21st century technology. Laser cutters precisely slice different fabrics. These 3D printers build components, saving time and money. But some parts are still assembled the old-fashioned way. In Axiom's sewing room, we met Z.P.H.S. His resume includes the Houston Ballet and Cirque du Soleil. His new challenge, space gloves.
There is definitely an added sense of responsibility with space work.
This is more exacting.
This is more exacting.
So maybe it's like my mom was a seamstress. I don't know how many of you guys know how to sew, but not only has Axiom gotten chosen to make the spacesuits, they're actually now looking at different hardware that they're creating. And I think it's magnificent. Maybe you love to 3D print. Maybe you will be actually 3D printing items that go inside a spacesuit or other things. Again, from like a lander or some kind of, outpost or habitat for astronauts. Maybe you're going to be the person designs that. I have a friend named Renee Fronert who is designing the communications that go inside kind of the landers that will go onto the moon. There's a company called Nokia that has already been given the contract for putting 5G on the moon. So maybe your communications provider. This was called the Summer of Mars, and this is a proposed vehicle produced by NASA that could not only be a rover, but could also be a habitat. So maybe there will be Martian car salespeople. We're going to have farmers and botanists and agriculturists thinking about how we're going to grow food. Right now, they can grow food on basically cotton on the International Space Station. They've already proven they can grow plants in the lunar regolith, which is as sharp as diamonds, with the right nutrition. We'll have to figure that part out. How are we going to feed everybody? This company called Orbital Farm thinks that we can grow food in these kind of cellular bioreactors. We might extract the cells from a fish, from a cow, from any other animal, and grow food in that way in a closed loop system. There'll be needs for medics, but it's like maybe we'll do. Now, this is what is crazy about this particular invention is that it's like there would be a robot that might perform surgeries, but there also, you might don a pair of VR glasses and then perform that surgery via virtual reality. I don't think I want to be the first person that is experimented upon, but these are things that, and this is an actual company, Avatar Medic. You can look it up online. NASA is also using virtual reality to train astronauts how to do a spacewalk and other maneuvers in space. It's also a way they think they're going to keep astronauts mentally healthy. For example, I love the outdoors. I love trees. I love the sound of the ocean. I love water. So imagine if I start to get really like homesick, maybe I put on my virtual reality, all of a sudden I'm in some like mountain hiking thing, or I'm at the beach, and it would be a way to keep myself mentally healthy. Now I'm going to, whoops, I want to show you this, but I'm going to turn off the sound. Sorry, let me do that one more time. There was only one satellite in 1957, Sputnik, but through time, I'm going to kind of speed through this. All of a sudden, by 1959, we had that many satellites. 1961, 1963. All of a sudden, all these satellites are in low Earth orbit, and you're going, okay, well, what? And then you start getting into the 90s and into the 2000s, and then look at this debris now. By this, and it's like the last kind of that, it's like we even kind of saw, kind of sort of sample this was pre-pandemic. So again, we go from one to all of that, and now there is a problem. You've got old satellites that didn't deorbit correctly. You've got space debris, and some of it is microscopic. I mean, and some of it's like less than like probably 4 millimeters. But it's like if it is traveling at 17,500 miles per hour or faster and happens to crash into your spacecraft, that could be devastating for you and your crew. In the fall of 2021, SpaceX, there were astronauts headed to the International Space Station on a SpaceX rocket. They'd been in kind of like in flight about 5 hours. They were getting ready to go to bed when mission control said, nope, get back in your spacesuits. You're going through a field of space debris. If we don't solve the issue and figure out how we can better get rid of some of the space debris, by the time we get ready to go to Mars, we may not even be able to leave Earth, because we can't get through low Earth orbit with all of this space debris. So there have been proposals, everything from satellite embracer, or kind of like magnetic, kind of like satellite grabber, to what they're calling the space claw. So trying to solve that. If you want to be a billionaire, that's the industry I would go into. Be literally low Earth orbits, kind of like garbage collector or our space debris recycler. And you might end up doing asteroid mining and looking for copper, gold, aluminum, titanium, platinum, natural gas. In September, we'll get the return sample from OSIRIS-REx. And that's this mission that kind of landed on the asteroid Bennu. And we'll see what was actually down on and in that asteroid. Maybe you'll have the first ever space tourism company on the moon. Buy your tickets now. Space elevator. This has been a proposed concept for a very long time. Space Court Foundation. The Artemis Accords. There have been many nations that have signed this, and basically they're based on the 1967 Outer Space Treaty of the United Nations, which said space should be used for peaceful purposes. Unfortunately, we have humans, so hopefully they'll keep in mind that space should be used for peaceful purposes. But you're going to need, like, if we go to the moon and India gets there first, does India own it? Does ISRO own it? If you are an astronaut for ISRO and you claim and find something on an asteroid or Mars, does it belong to you or the company or country that sent you? How then do we, kind of settle disputes? And this is where there are many programs in the U.S., especially at the University of Mississippi, that have a space law program. And maybe that's something that intrigues you. Luxury goods. I mean, if I'm going to the moon, I don't want to take a ratty old suitcase. I want something nice, something Louis Vuitton. This was actually an ad that was done with Sally K. Ride, Buzz Aldrin, and Jim Lovell. Of course, Buzz and Jim were Apollo astronauts. Sally Ride was the first female in space. 3D printing. They've already used it on the International Space Station to 3D print tools. Again, like I told you about relativity space, they're 3D printing rockets. And I'll show you a bit of this video. And again, you'll see they've got these huge platforms. I won't play all of this. You can look it up online. But I mean, imagine being a welder and beginning to assemble some of these 3D printed parts. And It's basically through kind of like software driven manufacturing, exotic materials, designs, geometrics. And so again, these humongous structures, but to think about that, you could 3D print a rocket in literally like 60 days, astounding. Now, here's what I find very interesting is that we also need 3D printing food, and this is already happening in various places around the world. And, you know, a lot of times it's texture. A few years back, I had the opportunity to test out 3D printed pizza. It was delicious. They could make a pizza in about 90 seconds. Again, astounding that this is where food production could come in, because imagine you can't, the rocket will be entirely too heavy to take all the food that you would need for 3 years, right? So if we can 3D print our food, that has some great possibilities. It all kind of started out when they started 3D printing smaller items, and they're like, hey, what if we put food substances in here? There are companies that are layering and printing all kinds of chocolates and desserts. In Europe, there are places that you can go and have 3D printed food. And so, like I said, 3D printed pizza, 3D printed chocolates, and then really kind of like more and more kind of like impressive things. So not just coming out of their traditional oven, but literally 3D printing even chicken nuggets. So imagine what else that you could possibly 3D print, and using plastics in some way to kind of like even 3D print what you're eating on. But you can also check this video out if you just do 3D printed food. Again, it's pretty exotic, and it would be interesting to see if the taste holds up. So that's what they're still trying to perfect. This was done by a company called Icon. Her name is Melody Yashar. She won an actual 3D printed habitat contest. There's going to be needs for chefs on Mars. There's a company, it's Orbital Assembly, it's now called Above Space, and they will be the possibility of, these are the people advertising for a maintenance crew worker. This will be one of the platforms in kind of like commercial space stations, but it won't be only be used for research. It will be basically a space hotel that you could travel to. They're hoping to basically, with the way they will sort of, I guess, manipulate their orbiter, that it would produce about 38% Mars gravity, so that again, that kind of centralized pressure ring, and the docking hub will be right at its center. But who knows, maybe you guys will go, hi, Mom and Dad, I got a job in hospitality in space, or I'm going to be the concierge, or I'm going to be the pilot for this orbiting space station. And so they're going to have, I think, 24 habitation modules. Then they'll have other spaces for other research projects, but you'll need waiters and chefs, and then there are going to be scientific pods there. So again, this is their plan. They're hoping to be in orbit by 2028. So you'll need people who will communicate science. And then and this could be you guys one day, is living on Mars with your family, growing. Can you imagine having a family on Mars? As Albert Einstein said, never lose a holy curiosity. Somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known. I always like to give props out. This is my best teacher ever. She was amazing. And whether you see yourself on the ground in a white room, developing the software, building the spaceships, running things from mission control, or out there in space, that is really my encouragement, to see yourself in space. And I know I took much longer to answer your question, but I think your question's so important to kind of like this whole process, is that I want you to know how many different opportunities there are in a career in space. Thank you so much for asking that question.
Thank you.